while since anyone's made the world this nervous.
Deadpool and Wolverine may have just given us our brand new MCU Wolverine. The Wolverine that will pick up the claws after Avengers Secret Wars and replace Hugh Jackman as the X-Man. News from Marvel's Comic-Con presentation combined with Easter eggs from She-Hulk may have just confirmed that Henry Cavill's version of Wolverine is the Wolverine from the main MCU timeline, aka Universe 616. Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and count them, two actors have played Wolverine in live action. The legendary Hugh Jackman and of course my boy Henry Cavill. And we think this fun little wink and nod fan casting of the Cavill-rine in Deadpool and Wolverine may wind up being more than just another gratuitous cameo.
Why do you have a band-aid on your head?
Oh yeah, apparently I was reaching too far on a theory and I bumped my head.
Yeah, that tracks.
And I'm about to do it again. So when Deadpool is on his mission across time and space to find a Wolverine, we see him encounter all sorts of Logans from across the multiverse, many from classic X-Men comics. Now, in every universe Deadpool travels to, the Wolverine he encounters looks like Hugh Jackman, except for one. Now, the rules of the Marvel multiverse and how variants work is a little convoluted. In Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange implied that variants of the same person look different across universes.
Do you know a Peter Parker who's Spider-Man?
Yes.
Is that him?
No.
See?
But every variant of Doctor Strange that we've met looks like Benedict Cumberbatch. I think Loki handled variants the best by showing us that there are Loki variants who do look like Tom Hiddleston, but there are also Loki variants with very different faces, races, sexes, and even species. So what does this have to do with the Wolverine? Well, I found it interesting that there was only one Wolverine that had a different face from the others that all look like Hugh Jackman. And that got me to wondering, why? Why does this specific Wolverine look different from all the others? Well, the obvious answer is that they just wanted to have some fun and give a nod to the popular fan casting of Henry Cavill as Wolverine. But I'm wondering if Marvel actually has plans to take this cameo even further. And I'm wondering that if this universe that Deadpool traveled to was actually the mainline MCU. And there's evidence both in this scene as well as in She-Hulk and from Captain America Brave New World that suggests that this is the MCU Wolverine. In She-Hulk, we see an article on this website that talks about a man with metal claws getting into a bar brawl, a clear reference to Wolverine, and more specifically, a veiled reference to the first time we see Wolverine and his adamantium claws in his bar fight in the first X-Men.
I know what you are. You lost your money. You keep this up, you lose something else.
Now, right under that article about a man with metal claws getting into a bar brawl, we see an article about why there's a giant man sticking out of the ocean. This is, of course, in reference to the giant celestial sticking out of the ocean that we saw in the Eternals. And at Marvel's San Diego Comic-Con panel, we got footage from Captain America Brave New World where we hear mention that this celestial is made of adamantium.
Just when I think my dream of a nerdy life can't get any more complete, I hear Harrison Ford say adamantium.
Adamantium, of course, being the same metal that coats the skeleton of Wolverine. Now, in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Wolverine agreed to let himself be coated in adamantium because he was hungry for revenge.
No law. No code of conduct. You point me in the right direction, you get the hell out of my way.
Feeling vengeful can be a nasty habit. I mean, there are plenty of times where I get into little spats on Twitter and I allow myself to get overwhelmed and angry, kind of like Wolverine. This also leads to me feeling really anxious and I unknowingly start doing things like biting my lips. So I needed something to help distract myself from a stressful situation and help me forget those bad oral fixation habits and replace them with a positive one. That's why I started using Fume. They're the sponsor of this video.
Is that a vape?
It's not a vape, it's not electronic, and it doesn't have pods filled with potentially harmful chemicals. Instead, it has these plant-based cores that are infused with natural flavors to create natural flavored air. You see, flavored air is quickly becoming the leading alternative to things like vaping and smoking, and Fume contains no nicotine. It is not addictive, and it contains no toxic flavors. Instead, it contains plant-based flavors like spearmint ice, cinnamon hearts, and my current favorite, orange vanilla. With flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation habits through a passive diffusion system that does not use electronics, vapor, or combustion. But mostly I like that it still gives me something to reach for when I feel anxious, and it even has movable parts that makes an incredibly satisfying sound. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be their next success story. For a limited time, use my code ScreenCrush to get your free topper. It's the perfect accessory for your Fume device. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. It's chewable for those who love to fidget, and it's reusable. So head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use the code ScreenCrush or scan the QR code on the screen to get your free Fume topper when you order your Journey Pack today. Now, as of this moment, mutants and the X-Men aren't a thing in the MCU. Well, not really.
Like a mutation.
Sure, we had that Ms. Marvel moment hinting that the Mutant X gene is coming, but the concept of mutants and the X-Men, Charles Xavier and his mutant research, none of that is a thing yet. And that's yet another reason that I think this Wolverine is the MCU Wolverine. And look, bar fights aren't really something that Wolverine participates in after joining the X-Men, but they were quite common for Wolverine when he was a rugged loner like an X-Men 2000 before joining the X-Men, and he was a cigar-smoking, bar-dwelling cage fighter. So it makes sense that the MCU's Wolverine at this moment in time would be drifting through life, getting into bar fights along the way, and exercising that classic temper, because an MCU Wolverine would have yet to have been discovered by the X-Men because, well, they don't yet exist. And without the X-Men and the mentorship of Charles Xavier, Wolverine wouldn't have become the hero we know him to be. So, we know very little about the MCU's Wolverine, but what we do know is that he is in a rugged loner stage of life, he's getting into bar brawls, he has no family in the X-Men, and he already has his metal claws, not his pre-adamantium bone claws. This description of what the MCU Wolverine would look like fits perfectly with the Wolverine we saw Cavill portraying in Deadpool and Wolverine. Alone, temper as bad as ever, white tank top, smoking a cigar, working on his motorcycle, not in the X-Mansion garage, but in what looks like some kind of abandoned warehouse, and telling Deadpool to get lost, just like this classic Wolverine moment from X-Men First Class when a young Charles Xavier and Eric Lyncher tried to recruit Wolverine all those years ago.
Excuse me, I'm Eric Lyncher.
Charles Xavier.
Go yourself.
This version of Wolverine that Cavill is playing is the exact type of Wolverine we'd expect for a brand new beginning for this character, and for a universe like the 616 where the X-Men don't yet exist. This means we might get to see the creation and the formation of the 616 X-Men, but in order for them to do the character of Wolverine justice and do him right, he will need to have already existed on the timeline for at least a century or two, because Logan has a long journey before he arrives in Westchester and joins the X-Men. Hell, we might even get to see an MCU Wolverine Origins movie. Ah, come on, hear me out. A Wolverine movie where we learn through the eyes of this new Wolverine what a mutant even is. Keep in mind, in the first X-Men film, Wolverine was surprised to learn that there were others like him.
You're not the only one with gifts.
Granted, this Wolverine would live in a universe where superhumans are common, but there's gotta be something different about being born with power. About being born different. So through the eyes of Wolverine, we could learn about the MCU's version of mutants and the mutant gene, and how that will all be incorporated into a universe that for the longest time couldn't even say the word mutant without being sued. And in an Origins type movie, we could see flashbacks where Logan served alongside Captain America and Bucky Barnes in World War II. Maybe he met the former Black Panther, King T'Chaka, on a special mission in Wakanda. Okay, I've got it. Logan is recruited by William Stryker to be on his little task force like we see in the comics and in the movies. We learn that Stryker is in pursuit of an indestructible metal like vibranium, and that's why we see them travel to a place like Wakanda. Not even vibranium ends up meeting the requirements of what he's looking for. Years later, we'll see Stryker discover adamantium on that giant celestial sticking out of the ocean. He then brings Wolverine back into the fold for the Weapon X program, coats his skeleton and bone claws in adamantium. Wolverine rebels, something happens that causes him to lose his memory, and now he's been wandering aimlessly, waiting to be found by the X-Men.
You're not the only one with gifts.
And look, I love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Anytime I'm asked who's your favorite superhero, I give a very specific answer. Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. I am so glad they brought him back for Deadpool and Wolverine, and I'm really glad we're finally going to see him in a freaking Avengers movie. Yes, I believe wholeheartedly that he will be in Avengers Secret Wars, hell, maybe even Doomsday. But after that, for the next saga of the MCU, I would assume that Jackman would finally step aside, at least for a decade or two, until he decides to come back for an Old Man Logan movie. And I think that the perfect casting for his replacement would be somebody like Cavill that can bring the godly physique, bring the grit and the heart, and give us a new take on the character while still staying true to the key aspects of Wolverine that we know and love and expect. Again, I know that in all likelihood, this scene was just a super fun wink and nod for the fans, similar to John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic and Multiverse of Madness, but I really do think that Henry Cavill, whose schedule is freed up now that he's no longer playing Superman, could be a great addition to the MCU as the Wolverine. And his appearance in Deadpool and Wolverine makes me all the more certain that he'd be the right choice. Now, we also need to talk about the Secret Wars of it all. I've said before that I think Secret Wars is going to take place in the Void. In the comics, Secret Wars takes place on Battle World, which is essentially a culmination of various worlds into one planet. Well, what is the Void if not a culmination of various worlds? Plus, if we see a scenario where the multiverse dies in Avengers Doomsday, which is what I think is going to happen, they would all end up in the Void. It just makes sense. Now, we've long talked about the fact that come the end of Secret Wars, we'd probably see the MCU get a bit of an in-canon reboot. Like I just said, we'll probably see the multiverse destroyed in Doomsday, and at the end of Secret Wars, we'll see a new, fresh universe be created, just like in the comics. In the 2015 Secret Wars comics, we see the 616 mainline Marvel Comics universe get combined with the Marvel Ultimate Universe. And we've long suspected that the Avengers Secret Wars movie will have a similar ending that results in a semi-reboot of the universe. And perhaps in that semi-rebooted universe, we would get a universe where the X-Men and the Avengers now coexist, setting the stage for future stories. And characters like Deadpool and his friends and family will join the MCU. And in this new rebooted universe, I think it's safe to assume we would have a new Wolverine. I mean, sure, they could bring in Hugh Jackman as their new Wolverine, but the guy has already retired once, and I mean, how much longer do we expect him to play the character? And look, I'm not saying they should kill him off again, but maybe we get a scenario where he decides to stay in the Void and live his life with a newfound family, and we could get an emotional scene where Deadpool asks Jackman's Wolverine to come with him to this newly formed MCU, but Wolverine declines and says that he wants to stay in the Void because his time has passed, giving us a very meta passing of the torch. But he also encourages Deadpool to go live in the newly formed MCU and to be an X-Man or even an Avenger. That would be a perfect end to Hugh's time as the character and open the door canonically for a new version of Wolverine to be introduced, a Wolverine we've already met, Henry Cavill. And it still leaves the door open for, say, an Old Man Logan movie a decade or two from now that takes place in the Void, the perfect setting for a true adaptation of Old Man Logan. And guys, again, I love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and it's hard to imagine anyone else playing the character, and since Disney probably won't cast me as Wolverine, I can't think of another better option than Henry freaking Cavill. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know, would you like to see Henry Cavill be the MCU Wolverine? And if not him, then who? Should we make Jackman do it till he's 90? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, or you can at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, be sure to subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Colton Ogburn.